We're talking about a subject that has been going on the last few months.
You've been out there. You've covered this very well. I might add. You've covered this very well.
Talking about federal agents here in Chicago. So every Thursday we check in with our friends at Block Club Chicago, and joining us now from Block Club is reporter Mack Liederman. Thank you so much, Mack, for joining us again. And I think you might be muted.
You might be muted.
Oh,
there you go.
Well done.
There you go. Perfect.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, you know, we're talking about, first, one of the stories you guys have been working on. Hundreds previously detained by ICE could be released by a judge, judge under a new order. Tell us about that story and what you guys have found out.
Yeah, so my colleague Melody Mercado was in the courtroom yesterday. It's been a long-running case dating back to a 2018 consent decree that limits ICE agents' ability to make warrantless arrests, which we've been seeing in droves on these viral videos on the streets of Chicago, obviously, that you guys have been covering as well. But the judge in the courtroom made a ruling that the federal government admitted to be very strong and significant, and that ruling could lead to the release of over 600 people who have been arrested by ICE since June. These arrests date from June to the end of October. And it gives us these first real insights of how many people have been swept up in this and where. That's over 1,800 people that were potentially arrested in a way that violated this consent decree. But out of those 1,800 people, all but 600 of them have already self-deported or have been pressured into deporting before going through the full legal process for immigration to stay in the United States. So really interesting here. The judge asked the federal government to produce reasons why any of these 615 people may be required to stay in custody before their trial, but he's eventually going to potentially rule to release hundreds of these people, if not most of them.
Mack, U.S. District Judge Jeffrey Cummings also ordered immediate release 13 people. Do we know who the 13 are, and do we know why he made that order?
Yeah, these are 13 people I believe are active parties named inside this lawsuit. I know a little bit about their stories in particular, but I know more that there were some kind of detailed numbers that we hadn't seen before about the types of people being arrested and where. That includes almost 60 people who have been arrested while they were at work, whether that be driving a rideshare or an Uber or working on a landscaping job. There had been around 10 people who had been arrested while waiting outside of work for work. Day laborers by a Home Depot or a Menards, and another 6 people who had been arrested in front of family members. So Judge Cummings said that all this painted a pretty compelling pattern that many of these arrests were made in violation of that consent decree that limits warrantless arrests without probable cause.
What about ICE's risk assessments? You know, what do they show?
Yeah, part of what the federal government presented in court yesterday was risk assessments for these 615 people. I believe they said about 400 of them were considered low risk. The other 2 landed in more higher risk categories. I believe there are around 12 people that they suggested out of the 615 that should not be certainly released at all. That's why the judge is now ordering to detail explanations about each and every one of these people and why they should stay in the custody if the federal government really wants to push for it. But the plaintiffs in the party, which are representing these 13 people who brought the lawsuit, said that these risk assessments are rather nebulous. They don't know exactly what went into them, whether they're viable or not. So how the government calls someone high risk, low risk, medium risk, that's subject to interpretation.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered. Do you have another question?
No, I was going to say, because I know we've got other topics we're going to get to.
You know, there was a big gathering there in Little Village. I think it was earlier this week. So, Mack, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back to talk about that meeting and what went on. Welcome back to Chicago Now. We're bringing back in Block Club reporter Mack Liederman. Thank you again for joining the program. We just talked about hundreds previously detained by ICE, that they could be released by a judge under a new order. And now we're talking about what happened earlier this week. And there's a lot of coverage and a lot of, you know, different sound bites, I guess, that we got from some government officials. One being from Governor Pritzker, who was in Little Village. And it was after he was being taunted by Border Patrol Chief Gregor Bovino on social media. What was that exchange like, if people at home are just watching and they're not really sure what happened earlier in the week between the two?
In Little Village on Tuesday, I believe, for Veterans Day, in which Governor Pritzker appeared at Manuel Perez Jr. Plaza for the greet veterans in the neighborhood, many of them immigrant veterans. And what predated that was an exchange between Greg Bavino, the Border Patrol chief, who is known to pick a fight or two or many on social media. He responded to Governor Pritzker posting about the photo op of Border Patrol agents in front of the bean, and he welcomed him to, quote unquote, feel free to join us, Governor Pritzker, as we do immigration enforcement in Little Village on Tuesday. So the governor went to Little Village for this event, and there was no Greg Bavino, and rather there was reports that Greg Bavino was imminently headed out of town along with his entire command to go do immigration enforcement in Charlotte instead. So Pritzker obviously had his time to take a few digs at Bavino, in which Bavino drew boos from this crowd of veterans, which I found very compelling. But Bavino, of course, might have not been there in person, but he certainly was still on his phone, so he shot back, taking the governor to task for having his speech interrupted by protesters. There were 2 protesters at the event who grabbed the microphone and interrupted Pritzker's speech out of concern over state police making arrests outside the Broadview ICE facility, which we've been seeing more and more since fences have been taken down over there. State police have come in and doing a lot of the crowd control around the facility. So Bavino tried to take a dig at Pritzker, but Pritzker was the only one there really with boots on the ground, despite Bavino putting out this threat that he was going to be there. So obviously I think we've seen this pattern of trolling back and forth as a larger part of the narrative here.
Mack, one question, I wanted to follow up on that. Do we know, did Bavino ever have any intent to be there? Was he did he want to be there and he got pulled away, or was it just he was baiting the governor to get there?
Yeah, I mean, in the Twitter debate back and forth on this, he said, quote unquote, Governor, feel free to join us in Little Village Tuesday. He never followed through. He was not in Little Village Tuesday. Yeah.
You know, I want to switch topics just because there's a lot of things that you guys are covering over at Block Club. One talking about something that happened over in South Shore. So there's residents, all residents to leave as court takes control of South Shore building raided by feds. Tell us about that headline. What did the story say?
Yeah, so this is something I've been covering since the day of that very jarring federal raid over at the South Shore building. I'm sure everyone has seen the made-for-Hollywood style videos the Department of Homeland Security has made in the wake of that raid. But a lot of that has been lost at this. There's still people living in this building, and this building has had many, many problems for years. An investigation I did with my fellow reporters at Block Club found that there had been thousands of 911 and 311 calls made about this address in the years leading up to this raid, citing squalor conditions, issues with violence outside the door. And after the raid, people had been trickling out of this building given conditions for a while now. There's only maybe about a dozen left inside. So the judge who has been overseeing a foreclosure case against a property landlord who owes, I believe, $27 million on 3 buildings she owns in the South Shore neighborhood. She took control, the judge, of the building from the landlord, saying that even after the raid, they have not fully done cleanup efforts and that the building was still a fire waiting to happen, in her words. So as a means of last resort, she's taken control away from the landlord and given it to a receiver to fix up problems. And the first step she required the receiver to do was to move people out of the building as fast as possible and to give them financial support to do so. How that happens and where is still to be seen. But yeah, finally an order that will leave this building totally vacated and potentially gutted in the near future.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I know you sort of kind of talked about there's this degree of uncertainty, but do we know what's going to happen now at the property?
Well, we know it's in the hands of the receiver who was given $20,000 from this judge to help move people out and secure the building. One of the things the judge really took the previous landlord to task for was hiring security after the raid, only for the security to be taken away yet again. This building has attracted squatters, about 10 squatters still in the building, according to assessments of some of the landlords there. So the first step really is to move the residents out, to secure the building of security, to board up the doors, and then the fate of it from there, I think, is yet to be seen. I imagine at some point it may be sold.
Okay, Mack, our last topic here, and it's a big one that's been circulating online, that big photo op downtown at the Bean with Border Patrol agents. You know, Border Patrol agents, they were seen at the Bean on Monday posing for that photo. What's been the reaction you're hearing from local residents? I'll be honest with you, when I first saw this, Jake and Mack, I thought it was AI. I thought it was a joke.
Yeah.
And then I saw actually your report, and I said, oh, actually, nope, it is real. So what has been reaction from residents?
Yeah, that photo is certainly not AI. Our reporter Colin Boyle was the only reporter on the scene there that morning after a tip we got to go down to the bean as soon as possible. He was there bright and early, I think 5:30 a.m. that day, and the reaction has been much larger than even I think any of us over at Block Club anticipated it to be. Specifically, this detail that while the Border Patrol agents were appearing for the photo, they said, "Shout Little Village on three, 1, 2, 3," and the cameras flashed. And I think for many that kind of just really punctuated the callousness that many of these immigration operations have been perceived to be, like sweeping people off the street from landscaping jobs, attacking street vendors, pulling teachers out of daycares. Just that neighborhood, Little Village, obviously a Mexican American enclave where the vast majority or a lot of this immigration enforcement has really been focused. So I think for many that kind of felt like a final distaste in their mouth, and this picture almost seemed like a yearbook picture, a send-off, mission accomplished, if you will. Bovino ended up releasing his own version of that picture, I think, a couple days after, and he claimed, crime is down X, Y, and Z percent, despite widespread understanding that crime has been down X, Y, and Z percent months before Border Patrol had even stepped foot in Chicago. So for many, I think this photo just wasn't super friendly and wasn't received very well, and just gave a sense of people really just not wanting Border Patrol in their city and not wanting them at their monument either.
And Mac, to that point, that photo might result in a lawsuit. Is that right?
Yeah, Nish Kapoor has been known to take people using his art, that is Cloudgate, or the Bean, Cloudgate, I'm sure, as he calls it, down there, and taking them, suing them over it. And he had sued the NRA, I believe, years prior to a similar photo op in front of the Bean. He threatened a lawsuit in an interview just this week, so we'll see what comes of that.
Wow. Okay, Mack Liederman, thank you so much. Block Club Chicago, we appreciate your time as always.